The wind atop Everest never truly stops. It howls through the death zone like a ghost, and some believe it carries voices with it. In May of 2002, a 29-year-old American climber named Elena Travers embarked on the expedition of a lifetime. She had dreamed of Everest since childhood, not for glory, not even for adventure, but for closure. Her father had vanished on the mountain in 1986. His body never recovered. For Elena, Everest wasn't just a peak. It was a grave she wanted to understand. Elena was no novice. She'd climbed Denali, Kilimanjaro, the Matterhorn. She trained in the Himalayas for 2 years. Locals called her Ice Heart, not for her coldness, but for her control under pressure. But Everest is different. It doesn't care how prepared you are. She joined a team of 6, led by a veteran Sherpa named Tenzing Dorji, with over a dozen summits under his belt. Their approach was via the southeast ridge route, dangerous, yes, but common. The weather forecast was ideal. Spirits were high. There were no signs that anything would go wrong, but on May 17th, less than 100 meters from the summit, Elena radioed the group from behind. She said she needed a moment to rest and catch her breath. It wasn't unusual. At 8,700 meters, oxygen becomes your most prized possession. The team agreed to wait, but when they turned back 15 minutes later, Elena was gone. No scream, no sign of struggle, no equipment left behind, just wind and sky and silence. In a place where everything is white, it's easy to lose what matters most. They searched for 12 hours, risked frostbite, ignored their oxygen limits. But Elena was never found. Some believe she fell into a hidden crevasse. Others whispered of disorientation, or worse, hallucinations, common near the summit. The expedition was called off, and Elena Travers became the 204th person to die on Mount Everest. Or so they thought. The aftermath, her story hit the news, but the coverage was brief. Another death on Everest, tragic but not rare. Her family grieved quietly. No body was recovered, just a plaque at base camp and a name added to the list of those the mountain refused to give back. But her mother, Anne Travers, never believed the official story. She didn't fall, she said in one interview. She was taken by something. Those words were dismissed, stress, grief, madness even. But Anne's eyes held a certainty that chilled people. She returned to Nepal every year on the anniversary, lit candles, paid Sherpas to retrace Elena's route. She was desperate, haunted, and then silence. For nearly a decade, the mountain kept its secret, a new climber. A new clue in 2011, a British climber named Gareth Vail prepared for his 3rd summit attempt. Unlike Elena, Gareth had failed twice before, once due to weather, once due to injury. He was determined to make this one count. He wasn't interested in fame. He had no sponsors, but he had one obsession: documenting forgotten tragedies on Everest. He'd heard the story of Elena Travers. It intrigued him. On May 13, 2011, as Gareth neared Camp 4, he noticed something strange in the icefall west of the main trail. A glint of red beneath a thin veil of snow. Most climbers ignore such things. Everest is littered with abandoned gear and frozen corpses. But Gareth didn't look away. He veered off the path, and that's when he saw it. A torn flag patch, American, stitched to a jacket sleeve. The color had faded, but the initials sewn inside hadn't. Elena Travers. The jacket was buried under snow and ice, but there was no body, no bones, no gear, just the sleeve. Something or someone had taken everything else. Gareth photographed it, logged the coordinates. But what came next was even stranger. The missing pages. When Gareth returned to Camp 2, he found his backpack had been opened, nothing stolen. Just disturbed. His journal, where he kept all his notes. Coordinates and voice recordings was gone, he asked everyone at the camp. No one had seen anything, nothing on the trail cameras. No tracks. It was as if the mountain had decided that Gareth had seen too much. He finished the climb, summited on May 20th, but he didn't celebrate. Back in Kathmandu, he filed a quiet report to the Nepal Mountaineering Association. He contacted Elena's mother. Anne was silent for a long time on the call. And then she said, "She always wore that jacket. It was her father's. I stitched the initials myself." And then, a letter 2 months later, Gareth received an anonymous letter. No return address. Handwritten. Inside was a photo, grainy and cold, of what looked like a makeshift shelter, built into the mountainside, hidden beneath a sheet of rock and snow, and scribbled on the back, "You're close." But she was closer. When Elena Matthews, a 28-year-old mountaineering prodigy from Canada, vanished in the death zone during her 2001 summit attempt, it barely made global headlines. A sudden storm. Whiteout conditions, no trace. That was the official story. But that's never the whole story on Everest. What no one expected was that 9 years later, someone would stumble onto a truth too bizarre to ignore. It began, oddly enough, with a weather shift. In April 2010, the jet stream shifted earlier than expected. Sherpa teams began noticing something unusual near South Col. Ice formations beginning to melt where they normally didn't until June. A British climber, Gareth Holloway, leading a documentary team up the southern route, diverted briefly off a traditional path. He was looking for a unique shot of the ridge at sunrise. Instead, he found a flash of blue. Not ice. Not rock. Cloth. Not just any cloth. A jacket, clearly from the early 2000s, wedged between two ice formations. Everest doesn't give back what it takes, not unless it has a reason. Gareth's footage, which would later air on UK television, shows the moment he freezes. His ice axe drops slightly, then he radios his team. "Oh, I think I've found something. Might be someone." It was Elena Matthews, perfectly preserved, frozen in time. Eyes half open. Her oxygen mask still in place, but there was something wrong. Something off. Instead of being curled up in a fall position or face down from exhaustion like most Everest casualties, Elena was upright. As if placed, Gareth later told The Guardian, it was like someone propped her there deliberately. "I've seen bodies up there before. No one dies like that, not naturally. And stranger still, she was clutching something, a small leather pouch. Authorities would later confirm it was an old Sherpa medicine bag. Inside were 5 perfectly flat stones, each etched with intricate carvings, not Nepali. Not Tibetan. Unknown. The carvings resembled Western constellations. And the most disturbing part wasn't what was in her hand, but what was carved behind her on the rock face itself. A symbol, a spiral with 12 dots around it, burned into the stone. Not scratched. Gareth's thermal camera showed residual heat, as if it had been recently seared, though the rock was sub-0. No one could explain it. Back in the UK, Gareth footage caused a brief media sensation. But when Elena's body was recovered by a special Nepali retrieval unit, a rare event given the dangers, authorities imposed a strict gag order on all details beyond her identity and cause of death. Cause of death? Hypoxia. Officially, unofficially? Forensic experts claimed her body showed signs of a substance in her blood they couldn't identify. A foreign compound, organic, not synthetic. Never cataloged, her eyes had been dilated, wide open, and frozen that way. Not in terror, but in focus. As if she was watching something. Then came the journal, Elena's climbing journal. Waterproof and sealed in her vest pocket, was recovered intact. The final entries, not in her handwriting. Pages 1 through 27 were hers. detailed summit plans, route, notes, temperature readings. But pages 28 to 31? Unrecognizable writing. Thin, tall, disjointed lettering. It resembled early linear A script, a language never fully deciphered. One phrase appeared over and over. The echo finds the seeker. The journal was locked away by the British Mountaineering Council, and Gareth was reportedly asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding its contents. But the story had already spread, not through the news, but through the climbing community. Word reached Mingma Dorje, a veteran Sherpa guide who had summited Everest 14 times and had once guided Elena's failed 1999 expedition. Upon seeing the symbol Gareth had documented behind Elena's body, Mingma went cold. He had seen it before. In 1998, during a solo trek near Makalu, he found a collapsed campsite, abandoned, no bodies, just gear, and the same spiral with 12 dots burned into the rock near the tent. Locals called it Laricha, or Mark of the Sky Spirit. They believe some climbers didn't fall to nature, but were chosen by something older than the mountain itself. To those who live beneath Everest, not every death is accidental. Some are ritual. At this point, interest in Elena's case exploded online. YouTubers, Reddit theorists, and armchair detectives dissected every frame of Gareth's footage. One user enhanced the thermal image and claimed to see a second heat signature in the footage, just beyond the visible range. Some said it was just a glitch. Others believed Elena hadn't been alone, but by far the most disturbing detail came from a climate data analyst in Japan. By cross-referencing Gareth's time-stamped footage with real-time climate data, he proved that the heat signature on the spiral symbol could not have existed unless something heated that spot in the last 24 hours, which meant someone or something had been there. Very recently, Gareth Holloway, once a quiet nature documentarian, disappeared from public life entirely in 2011. No further interviews. No online presence. Gone. The only trace? A blog post dated January 13th, 2011. Quickly deleted but archived by followers. There's something else up there. Something that watches. We never make it to the top alone. Elena's return from the mountain should have brought peace. Instead, it cracked open a door that had been frozen shut for centuries. Because then, more stories began surfacing. Stories from other climbers. Other disappearances, and a pattern began to form. For 9 years, the mountain had remained quiet, a place of solemn worship for climbers and of unanswered questions for the family of Mia Langley. But now that silence was about to break. The storm that engulfed the Himalayas on the morning of May 17, 2008, was nothing short of violent a tempest that tested even the hardiest of climbers. High winds carved ridgelines into razors. Snow blinded the most experienced SHERPA. It was on that day, during a descent from Camp 4, that a British climber named Thomas Everhart took shelter in a crevice beneath a collapsed ice shelf. What he found there, no one could have imagined. A torn fragment of red fabric, faintly peeking from the ice wall, caught his eye. Beneath it, the outline of a shelter camouflaged from sight. A cave, perhaps, or something deliberately hidden? Thomas pressed forward. Inside was a crude lean-to structure made of canvas and bent aluminum rods. There were signs of habitation, burned out fuel canisters, half-melted snow tins, and a cracked mirror suspended from a beam. But it was what lay in the center that froze him. A woman's boot, weathered, cracked, stamped faintly with initials. Thomas knew the name. Everyone did. He took photographs and marked the coordinates. When he returned to base camp, he presented his discovery to the Nepalese authorities and the British consulate. Within hours, the site was placed under strict lockdown. But word had already escaped. The world remembered Mia Langley. And now they demanded answers. Reporter, BBC. The mystery of Mia Langley may have taken a dramatic new turn as climber Thomas Everhart reportedly discovered what appears to be a survival shelter. News anchor, CNN, international investigators and forensic analysts are now en route to the site, as speculation grows that Mia may have survived longer than initially believed. The cave was dubbed the Silent Camp, remote, sealed in ice. Preserved by altitude, forensic specialists began their descent within 72 hours. What they uncovered inside would shake the assumptions made nearly a decade earlier. They found journal pages torn, water damaged, but partially legible. A small tin box containing photographs. One showed Mia beside a rusted oxygen tank, holding up a hand-drawn map. Another displayed a cryptic symbol etched into rock behind her, an inverted triangle, with two parallel lines beneath. Experts identified it as an old Himalayan survival marker. Not one typically used by modern climbers, but a symbol known to local Sherpa tribes as Namtara, the in-between, a place neither of life nor death. The implications were clear. Mia had survived, at least for some time beyond her official disappearance. But for how long? And why hadn't she tried? To descend, there were no footprints, no paths carved, no final message, aside from a cryptic line scrawled inside the cracked mirror with red lipstick. Asterisk, asterisk, I hear them at night. They sing to the cold. Asterisk, asterisk, interviewer. Do you know of anyone who might have stayed up that high? Tenzing Rai, the mountainette, has places that are not on maps, places not for us. You stay too long, you stop being a person, you become part of it. Satellite imaging revealed that the area around the silent camp had a heat signature or residual warmth inconsistent with the ambient temperature. Had someone stayed there recently? Oh, or had something else been there with her? An analysis of the oxygen canisters found in the cave indicated a blend that wasn't available commercially until 2002 years after Mia vanished. So how did they get there? And more importantly, who brought them? The theory emerged that she wasn't alone. A forensic team also found claw marks on the canvas walls, on the aluminum poles. Not animal, human, deep, jagged, desperate. We are not ruling out the possibility of captivity. There are elements that suggest Mia may have been held against her will, or possibly entered a psychological state due to altitude-induced psychosis. But we are keeping all avenues open. Among the personal effects recovered was a bracelet, a woven band with 6 beads. 5 were wooden, 1 was ivory. It matched one Mia's mother had said she wore constantly, until the day she disappeared. The evidence was sent to London for DNA confirmation. It was her, but Mia was still missing. No body, no bones. No final resting place, just that one shelter. And the silence that hung around it like a shroud, in the weeks that followed. Reports began to trickle in. Climbers from distant expeditions claimed to have heard laughter echoing from distant valleys. Footprints, barefoot, human were spotted. In snow where no one had tread. Superstition? Maybe Mia Langley had become something else, not lost, but transformed. Mount Everest, where each gust of wind can carry a scream, and no one below will ever hear it. The year was 2005, exactly 9 years since Emma Prescott disappeared on the northern route of Mount Everest. Her name had long since faded. From daily headlines, etched now only in obscure Reddit threads and the faded ink of old expedition journals. To most, she was just another unfortunate victim of the mountain's merciless terrain, but to Thomas, Graves, a seasoned British climber, an amateur investigator, she was an unfinished story. One he intended to finish, not for glory, but because something about her case always felt off. It wasn't just the disappearance, It was the details, the timing, the way people around her had gone silent, the fact that no body was ever recovered. Unusual circumstance given that Everest rarely hides its dead for long. Graves wasn't climbing for sport this time. He was climbing to uncover something that had haunted the thin air of Everest's northern ridge for nearly a decade. Before setting off, Thomas spends weeks in Lhasa, Tibet, poring through old Chinese expedition permits, local rumors, and declassified incident reports. He discovers a detail previously buried in bureaucracy. Emma had radioed base camp with a strange message just a day before she vanished. But the audio recording was missing, supposedly damaged. Her last known location, a high-altitude outcropping nicknamed the Whispering Face, a place many climbers refuse to speak of. Locals said the wind there didn't just howl, it spoke. Arriving at base camp, Graves is met with cold stares. When he mentions Emma's name, an older Sherpa immediately walks away. Another whispers, "Some places, sir, not made for search, not for looking." That night, his tent is unzipped. No footprints, no warning. Just a cold breeze and a single black and white photograph laid on his sleeping bag, a photo of Emma standing near an unmarked flag, high above the known trails. It wasn't just a mystery now. It was a warning. As Graves ascends, each step forward unearths new fragments of Emma's story. Fellow climbers had seen her take a different path near Camp 3, a lesser-known offshoot avoided due to frequent avalanches. Some say she was following strange echoes. Others think she was chasing something only she could hear. Graves reaches the fork. Against his Sherpa's advice, he turns off the main trail, stepping into a region untouched since 1996. 4 days into the detour, a flash of color beneath a glacier's overhang catches his eye, a tattered British flag. Frozen mid-flap. Graves pulls it out, nearly falling into a concealed crevice. Inside, he sees remnants, an old oxygen tank engraved with Prescott 96 and frost-covered ropes. Something about the placement doesn't make sense. It's as if someone moved her things here and not left them. Among the frozen gear, Graves finds a waterproof case. Inside, a decades-old Olympus camera, battery long dead, but the film surprisingly intact. Back at Camp 4, using improvised equipment, he carefully extracts the roll. Several images are ruined, overexposed, but 3 are intact. The first shows Emma smiling, wind whipping her hair, with snow behind her untouched and pristine. The second, a silhouette in the background, not a climber. Something bigger, broader, masked. The third image is just a blur, but it looks like her trying to take a photo in panic. The exposure captured a strange, dark, pattern-like markings carved into stone. Graves returns to the location in the second photo. He searches relentlessly and finds a narrow crack in the rock wall, concealed by snow. A faint carving marks its side, 2 interlocked spirals, like some forgotten Tibetan GLYPH. Inside is not a cave, but a bunker, artificially made, a cold metal interior. Snow has barely entered it. On the ground, he finds signs of habitation, old canned goods, oxygen tanks, journals, and a single red scarf. Emma's scarf, tucked between debris, is a notebook, the writing mostly intact. "I don't think I'm alone," one entry reads. Another, he talks to the wind. "I don't know if he's real. I don't know if I still am." The final entry simply says, "He wants me to forget who I am." Behind a panel in the cave wall, Graves finds a handheld tape recorder. He presses play. Emma's voice fills the empty bunker. "I thought I came here to climb Everest, but now I know I was meant to find something or someone." He watches. He feeds on the lost. "I tried to leave, but he made me forget the way." The tape ends in static. Then a voice not her says one word, "Return." Graves stumbles out. Rattled, he begins descending with the evidence. But he's not alone. At base camp, one of the tents has been slashed. His Sherpa is missing. Graves receives a message written in charcoal on his gear bag. Not everything that vanishes is meant to be found. Weeks later, after reaching Kathmandu and sharing his findings, the climbing community erupts. Some call it a hoax. Others claim it proves a secret cult among the elite expeditions. But the photos and Emma's voice are real. Emma Prescott didn't just vanish. She was taken. And something on Everest is still waiting. When hope is long buried beneath the snow. Even the faintest signal can start an avalanche of truth. 9 years after her disappearance, the mountain had finally fallen silent. Expeditions had come and gone, each one stopping short of the truth, but in the spring of 2020, when Everest thawed once again under a reluctant sun, a British climber named Thomas Ballard was about to find more than snow and sky. Thomas wasn't new to Everest or to tragedy. He was the son of famed climber Alison Hargreaves, who had died on K2. Haunted by his mother's death, Thomas had spent his life seeking understanding in the mountains she once called home. When he planned this climb, he had no idea he'd step into the shadow of another story, one far colder. His goal wasn't fame. It was clarity, healing. He wanted to trace the lesser-used North Col route, where fewer climbers dared. It was riskier, wind-stripped, and brutally steep, but it was also where strange rumors had recently surfaced. A Sherpa had told him something bizarre over tea in Kathmandu, that a woman's voice had come through a broken radio frequency near Camp 3. The Sherpas dismissed it as mountain madness, a cold trick on the mind. But Thomas, he couldn't let it go. By the 18th day of ascent, the ice was pure silence. His group of 4 had thinned, 2 had turned back. Now it was just Thomas and a local guide named Lakpa, pressing upward toward the north face. On the morning of May 19th, Thomas reached a crevasse shelf rarely visited. Wind patterns had shifted that year, exposing ice fields normally buried deep, and wedged into that translucent wall was something unmistakable. Fabric. Bright red, barely visible. He dug frantically. Minutes passed. Then an hour. And then the shape of a boot inside. It was a frostbitten human foot still inside the gear. He radioed Lakpa, who arrived stunned and shaking. They kept digging. Eventually, a face emerged, or what was left of one. The skin was bleached and sun-hardened, but the features were preserved. Enough to recognize the impossible: a necklace, a bracelet, and stitched into the thermal lining, property of Eliza Monroe. The name stopped them cold. Eliza Monroe had vanished on Everest in 2011. No body, no trace, only a final radio message near Camp 4 before her signal disappeared into the wind. For years, her family had waited, prayed, wondered. Now, the mountain had returned her. What they found wasn't just a body, it was a question, one that rewrote everything. The discovery made headlines. Global news outlets replayed the footage endlessly: the red fabric, the frostbitten hand, the gear with her name etched in fading ink. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Thomas had also found a camera, half buried under the ice, water damaged, but intact enough to retrieve the memory card. It had survived, somehow. When the footage was restored, investigators and her family watched it in absolute silence. The final images showed Eliza inside a snow cave, not panicked, not running, just ... waiting, recording messages, talking to the lens as if someone would eventually find it. Her last words were whispered, almost lost in the hiss of frost. "If anyone finds this, tell them I didn't slip. I wasn't lost. I was hiding. He followed me up here. He knows the terrain better than anyone. I can't go back. I can't." Then silence. The screen went black. Theories exploded overnight. Who was she talking about? A local? A fellow climber? A guide? But the biggest clue came from her logbook, which was recovered inside a sealed thermal pouch next to her chest. It detailed her final days. She had become suspicious of another climber, a man who had changed names multiple times, someone who always appeared unannounced, who watched but never climbed. Eliza wrote, he says he's scouting, but he never carries gear. Never gets tired. I've seen him 3 times now, always at dusk. He knows where I am before I get there. And then, if I disappear, it wasn't Everest that took me. Mountains don't stalk people, but sometimes something in them does. The investigation reopened. Interpol was contacted. Expedition records were examined, multiple names flagged, but one stood out, a man named Darian Cray. He had appeared on 3 climbing permits using aliases. Always solo, always undocumented after base camp. And always vanishing into the upper routes. But he had never been caught. Until now, because when authorities released Eliza's footage, facial recognition experts noticed something. In the corner of one frame, barely visible, was the reflection of another figure, half covered, hooded, but present. It wasn't Eliza alone in that cave. Lekpa, the guide, returned to the same ridge weeks later with a forensic team. They scoured the area and found additional items, a makeshift lean-to, food rations, and a notebook not belonging to Eliza. Inside it were pages of strange, philosophical ramblings. Thoughts about the mountain being alive, about selecting people, about purification, and then a sentence that chilled investigators. To their core, she didn't scream when the cold took her. She accepted it, like they all do. They had found the lair, or part of it, but no sign of the man. Thomas Ballard would later say he never felt the same about Everest. That after that climb, the wind no longer felt like wind, but whispers. Always behind you. Eliza Monroe's body was returned to her family. She was buried with full honors, but no one could shake the idea that someone or something had remained behind, watching, waiting, and perhaps worst of all, still choosing. On Everest, death is expected, but Eliza's wasn't just a statistic. It was a warning, because not all who disappear are lost. They say the dead don't speak, but on Everest, in the stillness, sometimes they whisper. As dawn broke over the Himalayas in April of 2017, a team of climbers began their summit attempt on the North Col Route. Among them was Gareth Pike, a seasoned British mountaineer known for his analytical approach and deep respect for the mountains. This wasn't his first time scaling Everest, but it would be the one he would never forget. At 28,000 feet, just shy of the summit, Pike's oxygen mask began to frost over. He paused, allowing a fellow climber to pass, and gazed out across the glacier-scoured slope. That's when he noticed something odd. Half submerged in the ice, barely distinguishable from the terrain, was a splash of blue. Pike initially dismissed it. Leftover gear, a broken tent flap, maybe even a discarded pack, but something about it nagged at him. He turned, stepped closer. The wind howled, the ice crunched beneath his boots, and what he saw changed everything. The object wasn't gear. It was a body preserved in the dry, freezing air. A woman, curled in a fetal position, her features barely eroded, her hair long and dark, her eyes shut peacefully, and the most shocking part, she was wearing the same signature jacket that had become synonymous with Amelia. Wynn's final Everest photo. Pike immediately radioed base camp. The response was crackling, delayed by the altitude. But the urgency was unmistakable, a recovery. Team was dispatched from Camp 2. The operation took days. The altitude made every step a battle. But by May 1st, the body had been safely transported and confirmed through fingerprints and dental records. to be none other than Amelia Wynne. After 9 long years, she had finally been found, but with her return came more questions than answers. Back in the UK, the media exploded. Everest mystery solved, body of missing climber found on frozen ledge. British expedition stumbles on ghost of the mountain. Her family issued a statement, grief-stricken but relieved. Her brother Ethan said, "We always knew she'd be found. We just didn't expect it like this." But something didn't add up. The body was found far off the standard descent route. There were no signs of injury. No trauma. No fall. She had simply laid down. And that sparked a wave of investigation. Cut to Himalayan Search and Rescue Office. Kathmandu officials began combing through the recovered gear. Her journal had been miraculously preserved, pages sealed in a plastic Ziploc, shoved into a side pocket. What it revealed sent chills down even the most seasoned climber's spines. I don't know if I'll make it. One entry read, "But something is watching, following. It's not a man, but it wears the mountain." Suddenly, the mystery wasn't just about survival. It was about something darker. Her last days were not marked by storms or broken ropes. They were marked by paranoia. By fear. Something else. Geolocation data from her camera showed she had veered east off her path on the morning she vanished. No one could explain why. Experts debated disorientation, hypoxia, but she had written coordinates and a final note scribbled in her summit log. "This isn't an accident." The journal also included a crude sketch of what appeared to be a man in furs, standing at the mouth of a crevasse. Others thought it resembled something else. A mask? A distorted face? A hallucination? In the death zone, reality bends, dreams, and demons dance on the edge of reason. But Amelia's words weren't dreamy. They were sharp. Coherent. Terrified. A forensic analysis of her final steps, based on GPS and snow compaction, showed she walked over 2 miles away from her team before stopping at the ledge where she was found. No climber could explain that behavior, not without a reason, and that reason, many believed, was buried with her. Pike, the climber who found her, gave a rare interview to the BBC. He recounted seeing small handprints near the site, too small to be hers. He said, "And a strange rune-like marking carved into the ice nearby." Scientists dismissed the idea. Snowmelt patterns, they claimed, but others weren't so sure. Meanwhile, YouTube conspiracy theorists ran wild. Some claimed she was chased off the mountain. Others said she had found something and was silenced. One theory went as far as suggesting Amelia Wynne never died at all, and that what Pike found was a decoy. The latter was absurd. The body was confirmed. But the question remained, why did she wander? What did she see, and who or what was watching? Months after her discovery, a Netflix documentary aired titled Amelia, Ghost of the Summit. It broke records, but even it couldn't explain the final chilling image recovered from her camera. Photo taken just 2 hours before she vanished of a shadow on the ridge behind her. It wasn't a person. Too tall. 2. Misshapen. 2. Wrong, but it had eyes, and those eyes were glowing in the flash. Amelia's body may have returned from Everest, but her story never came down. It lingers. High above the clouds. In frost. In whispers. In the footprints that stop halfway across the snow. High above the clouds, where the air thins and every breath costs strength, mysteries lie buried beneath layers of snow, ice, and time. It had been exactly 9 years since Amelia Riker disappeared on Mount Everest. The mystery had gripped climbers, investigators, and thrill-seekers alike, an unsolved case wrapped in silence. But now something had shifted. The British climber David Carver had been the one to reignite the cold trail. After uncovering her abandoned tent And later, that camera with undeveloped film in a crevice no one had dared to search before. The world was reminded of her. The footage was fragmented, the voice distorted. But Amelia's spirit had not died with the storm, and David wasn't done. In the days after his return, David released more footage, not publicly but to a few trusted sources. One video, recorded in night vision, showed what looked like a narrow ice tunnel. Amelia's voice could be faintly heard, whispering. Not out of fear, but out of determination. She was documenting her survival. In one heartbreaking frame, she filmed her frostbitten hand clutching a necklace, her mother's locket. Her words, muffled by layers of clothing and emotion, said, "If I don't make it, tell them I fought." David knew what he had to do next: return. He'd go back not to climb Everest summit, but to reach the place where Amelia's final messages had been recorded. He wasn't chasing glory anymore. He was chasing her truth. With a team of 3 Sherpas and a single cameraman, David ascended again. This time, his route wasn't upward, it was sideways, descending into one of Everest's hidden glacier crevasses, the Serac Grave, a deadly corridor of shifting ice blocks and deadly silence. The ice tunnels seemed almost alive. Wind moaned through the narrow gaps, and shadows played tricks on their minds. But after 3 days, David found what he didn't dare hope for: a collapsed snow shelter, barely visible under wind-blown drifts. Inside it were personal effects: a tattered flag from her home country, half-burnt journal pages, and most chilling of all, a second camcorder. It still had battery life. It still worked. The footage was grainy and unsteady, but Amelia's face, pale, frostbitten, and resolute, filled the screen. "This might be the last entry," she coughed, visibly shaking. "I've rationed food. I haven't seen a rescue team in weeks. But I've documented the pass. If you find this, you'll know the shortcut. Not for me, but for others. For the next climbers." Even as death surrounded her, she was thinking about others. The footage ended with her whispering something barely audible: "No one gets lost forever." When David returned and shared the findings with the international media, the response was overwhelming. Amelia Riker's name trended globally for weeks. Her face, stoic, brave, defiant, was now a symbol. Climbers began leaving tribute flags at base camps. One group painted a mural at Namche Bazaar, a portrait of her layered with the quote, "No one gets lost forever." Expeditions began referring to her shortcut route as the Riker Path. She had become more than a missing person. She was a legend. David, though, was changed. He'd found more than artifacts. He'd felt her presence, her survival etched into the rocks, the snow, the silence. But there was one thing that still haunted him. A final frame, just before the camera died, showed what looked like a figure, far in the background. Not a rescue worker, not Amelia, not anyone they could identify, but standing still, watching her from the shadows of the cave. Was it real? A hallucination from frostbite and despair? Or something else? David refused to comment further. The following spring, the Himalayan Rescue Association officially declared the zone where Amelia was found a protected site. It became both memorial and mystery. Tourists began leaving small trinkets, locket replicas, handwritten notes, poems about survival. Documentary teams arrived, books were written, but no theory ever fully explained how she lasted as long as she did or why she disappeared in the first place. Her journal, partially recovered, suggested she had chosen to take a detour during a blizzard to help a fellow climber in trouble. No such climber was ever found. 1 year later, on the 9th anniversary of David's discovery, another climber reported seeing something strange at Camp 4, a stone monument, one that hadn't been there before. Engraved on it were just 3 words: "I came back." No footprints. No climbers in the area claimed to have made it, but it was there, Some say it was a tribute from David. Others believe Amelia somehow survived longer than even the videos showed, and some, quietly, only in whispers, believe she never left. The mountain at all. Today, when the winds howl on Everest's south side, Sherpas say they sometimes hear a woman's voice echoing across the glacier. Most call it folklore, but one Sherpa, Tashi Rinzin, who helped David on both expeditions, claims otherwise. He's heard the voice too. And once, while adjusting a prayer flag at base camp, he found a piece of film, new, unmarked, at the very base of the same glacier where Amelia's shelter was found. He hasn't dared develop it. They searched for answers at the roof of the world. They found echoes of a will unbreakable, of courage frozen in time. Some stories don't end where the trail ends. Some become part of the mountain itself.